Chapter 19, we pick up where we left off. David is basically whining and crying in his room over Absalom's death, basically saying, "Oh no, why didn't Absalom live? Why did my son die?" The rebellious son, you might remember, that overthrew the kingdom and caused chaos and countless lives to be killed. His men see him crying over Absalom, and his men are probably rightfully frustrated by this because they would interpret it as David preferring that they died instead of Absalom. Joab is about to come speak with David and give him some counsel that he really needs to hear because David was not relationally aware of how his actions were being perceived. We'll pick up in chapter 19. This is a great leadership lesson, the story, for you and for me. It shows us how we need to be aware of how the way that we act and the way that we respond in our emotions will be perceived by other people. And we might be dealing with things, but not everything we think has to be said out loud. And not everything we feel has to be shared. Some things we can keep to ourselves and we can wrestle down as we talk to God. David did not use wisdom in this situation. Verse 1. Joab was told, "The king is weeping and mourning for Absalom and for the whole army. The victory that day was turned into mourning because on that day the troops heard it said, 'The king is grieving for his son.' The men stole into the city that day as men steal in who are ashamed when they flee from battle. The king covered his face and cried aloud, 'Oh, my son Absalom, oh, Absalom, my son, my son.'" Basically, they should have been celebrating a great victory, but the men basically acted like they retreated in defeat because they didn't know how to respond. They should have been rejoicing, but instead they were silent because David was weeping. Then Joab went into the house to the king and said, "Today you have humiliated all your men who have just saved your life and the lives of your sons and daughters and the lives of your wives and concubines." He basically says, "You're embarrassing us, David. Shake it off. Get up." Verse 6, "You love those who hate you, and they hate those who love you. You've made it clear today that the commanders and their men mean nothing to you. You've made it clear by the way you responded that you don't care about the lives of your own men, David. I see that you would be pleased today if Absalom were alive today and all of us were dead. Now go out and encourage your men." Basically, he says, you need to stand up, you need to get over it, and you need to go be a man, and you need to be the leader that these men need. He says, "I swear by the Lord that if you don't, not a man will be left with you by nightfall. This will be worse for you than all the calamities that have come on from you from youth till now." So the king got up and took his seat in the gateway. When men were told the king is sitting in the gateway, they all came before him. Meanwhile, the Israelites had fled to their homes. Basically, he got up, he mustered up the strength, and he went and he did what needed to be done. He was not aware of how his actions were being perceived. How often in your life, how often in my life, have we let our emotions lead? Have we let our feelings lead? And we haven't made wise choices. We say this all the time: choices lead, feelings follow. We need to make wise choices in every situation, because when we're led by our feelings, more often than not, our feelings will betray us. Verse 9. David returns to Jerusalem. Throughout the tribes of Israel, all the people were arguing among themselves, saying, "The king delivered us from the hand of our enemies. He is the one who rescued us from the hand of the Philistines. But now he's fled the country to escape Absalom. And Absalom, who we anointed to rule over us, has died in battle. So why do you say nothing about bringing the king back?" King David sent this message to Zadok and Abiathar, the priests: "Ask the elders of Judah, why should you be the last to bring the king back to his palace? Since what is being said throughout Israel has reached the king at his quarters. You are my relatives, my own flesh and blood. So why should you be the last to bring back the king and say to Amasa, 'Are you not my own flesh and blood?' May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you are not the commander of my army for life in place of Joab." He won over the hearts of the men of Judah so that they were all of one mind. They sent word to the king, "Return, you and all your men." Then the king returned and went as far as the Jordan. Now the men of Judah had come to Gilgal to go out and meet the king and bring him across the Jordan. Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bahurim, hurried down with the men of Judah and meet King David. With him were 1,000 Benjamites along with Ziba, the steward of Saul's household, and his 50 sons and 20 servants. They rushed to the Jordan where the king was. They crossed at the ford to take the king's household over and do whatever he wished. When Shimei, son of Gera, crossed the Jordan, he fell prostrate before the king and said to him, "My lord, will you not hold me guilty? Do you not remember how your servant did wrong on the day my lord the king left Jerusalem? May the king put it out of his mind. For I, your servant, know that I have sinned, but today I have come here as the first from the tribes of Joseph to come down and meet my lord the king." Then Abishai said of Zeruiah, Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said, So many names, it's so hard to pronounce them right. I want you to know, if you hear them pronounced, I am guessing how they are all pronounced. I could be pronouncing every one of these names wrong. The most important thing for you to learn when you read your Bible in the Old Testament, whatever you read it confidently. Well, free tip for you. Shouldn't Shimei be put to death for this? He cursed the Lord's anointed. David replied, what does this have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? What right do you have to interfere? Should anyone be put to death in Israel today? Don't I know that today I am king over Israel? So the king said to Shimei, you shall not die, and the king promised him on oath. Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, this was the one who was lame. This was the one that he had blessed on account of Jonathan. He had blessed the house of Saul. He had not taken care of his feet or trimmed his mustache or washed his clothes from the day the king left until the day he returned safely. When he came from Jerusalem to meet the king asked him, why didn't you go with me, Mephibosheth? He said, my lord, the king, since I, your servant, am lame, I said, I will have my donkey saddled and will ride on it so I can go with the king. But Ziba, my servant, betrayed me, and he has slandered your servant to my lord the king. My lord the king is like an angel of God, so do whatever you wish. All my grandfather's descendants deserve nothing but death from my lord the king, but you gave your servant a place among those who eat at your table. So what right do I have to make any more appeals to the king? The king said to him, why say more? I order you and Ziba to divide the land. Basically, he said you need to part ways, and you two can separate and divide the land between the two of you. Mephibosheth said to the king, let him take everything, now that my lord the king has returned home safely. Barzillai the Gileadite also came down from Rogelim to cross the Jordan with the king and to send him on his way from there. Now Barzillai, I don't even know how to say this. Now Barzillai was very old, 80 years of age. He had provided for the king during his stay at Mahanaim, for he was a very wealthy man. The king said to Barzillai, cross over with me and stay with me in Jerusalem, and I will provide for you. But Barzillai answered the king, how many more years will I live that I should go up to Jerusalem with the king? I'm now 80 years old. Can I tell the difference between what is enjoyable and what is not? Can your servant taste what he eats and drinks? Can I still hear the voices of male and female singers? Why should your servant be an added burden to my lord the king? Your servant will cross over the Jordan with the king for a short distance, but why should the king reward me in this way? Let your servant return, that I may die in my own town near the tomb of my father and mother. But here is your servant, Kimham. Let him cross over with my lord the king. Do for him whatever you wish. Basically, he said, I'm too old. I really am at a point where I can't really hear well. I can't really taste well. He goes, I'd just be a burden for you. He goes, let me die where I'm comfortable. He says, if you want to take this man and bless him in my stead, go ahead, David. The king said, Kimham will cross over with me, and I will do for him whatever you wish, and anything you desire from me I will do for you. So all the people crossed the Jordan, and the king crossed over. The king kissed Barzillai and bid him farewell, and Barzillai returned to his home. When the king crossed over to Gilgal, Kimham crossed with him. All the troops of Judah and half the troops of Israel had taken the king over. Soon all the men of Israel were coming to the king and saying to him, why did our brothers, the men of Judah, steal the king away and bring him and his household across the Jordan together with all his men? All the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, we did this because the king is closely related to us. Why are you angry about it? Have we eaten any of the king's provisions? Have we taken anything for ourselves? Then the men of Israel answered the men of Judah, we have 10 shares in the king, so we have a greater claim on David than you have. Why then do you treat us with contempt? Weren't we the first to speak of bringing back our king? But the men of Judah pressed their claims even more forcefully than the men of Israel. Basically, David has come back into the kingdom. David has been established. There's people that helped him along the way. He is showing them honor. He is giving them favor. The guy that threw rocks and dirt at him, he's forgiven him. Israel is becoming reunited again under the banner of David. This story is primarily historical. There are some things that we can extrapolate from it and turn it over into our own life, primarily in early chapter 19, where we see how David was relationally unaware and made some poor choices. But even as he comes back, we begin to see it's almost like David gets his thoughts back. He gets his wits back about him. He begins to honor the right people. He begins to care for the right people. He begins to reunite the tribes. I share that with you for this reason. Sometimes in our life, we will have seasons where we will make unwise emotional relational choices. But when we ask God to give us wisdom, when we ask God for wisdom, he'll give it to us. And God will reveal to us the things that we need to say, the things that we need to do, and the things that we don't need to say or do. Don't do things in your own strength. Ask God, God, what is the wisdom of heaven? Reveal it to me. I'll wait for you. Be blessed today.